Good morning to you, and thank you so much for finding time and joining us. It's 11:15 a.m. here in Nairobi. My name is Amira Mogoto, and I'm here with the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start with the newspaper headlines, and we shall start with this from Kenya. The Star newspaper. Raila's chief agent, how Uhuru's men struck it rich. Kanchori describes how some bureaucrats lined their pockets during the campaigns. The Daily Nation, Eldoret farming eye of 10 billion fertilizer probe. Raila's blunder, Karua running mate intrigues. The Standard newspaper, it is back to the streets. That is what we have there. People Daily, state waits for VAT to pay staff. And then the Business Daily, Watchdog starts probe on banks for dollar price fixing. That's what we have. And then Taifa Leo, our leading Kiswahili newspaper. Ukabila Serikalini, I think they're talking about the ethnicity and how the numbers as far as the public offices are concerned. So it's right there. I'll just leave that alone and head over to some other newspapers from across the continent this morning. And we look at, let's finish up with Africa first. The New Times from Rwanda, lawyer petitions court on RIB's unconstitutional searches and call for non-divisive politics as Genocide Commemoration Week ends. That is on the New Times. And the Namibian, Mulunga's replacement linked to 1 billion Nanka tender. And then the Citizen from Tanzania, how to salvage white elephant sky crapers. That's what we have there. And this day from Nigeria, Tinubu Atiku PDP's petition, gross abuse of judicial process. The Nation as well from Nigeria, Tinubu to tribunal, petitions by Atiku PDP not competent. Okay, the Herald, this one is from Zimbabwe. Infrastructure development opens Zimbabwe to the world. And then Parliament to prioritize electoral amendment bill. The Daily News from Zimbabwe, CCC big wills face tough test as party finalizes its candidate selection process. And the Sun from Namibia, Esau throws his protege Nikki Punya under the bus. And the Daily Monitor from Uganda, inside speaker amongst Iron Sheet return drama. Very well. And others from the UK. The Daily Mail, at last, a leader who knows what a woman is. The genius who invented modern fashion. Okay, that's interesting. A leader who knows what a woman is. Let me just read down there and see what they're saying. Rishi Sunak fired a broadside as Sir Keir Starmer over trans rights yesterday as he insisted women do not have male genitalia. Okay. The Daily Telegraph, deaths rise as junior doctors go on strike. That is in the US. And the Times, unions look set to reject final deal on nurses' pay. The Daily Express, no appetite to make peace with Harry. That is on the royal family's focus on the coronation. And the Guardian from the UK as well, senior Tories turn against Braverman's racist rhetoric. FBI arrest 21-year-old over leak of defense documents. The iNews, families plead for disabled children to get access to their own savings. And then let's look at some papers from the US. We do also have the Guardian from the US. U.S. arrests suspect behind leak of Pentagon documents. The New York Times, airman arrested by FBI over leak of secrets on war. And then, and other subtitles there. The U.S. Today, Ukraine, document leak, fallout grows. Secret Service fights for mission purpose and fetching pet food pricey for owners. Okay. The Wall Street Journal, air guardsman arrested over leaked papers. First electric vehicle charges get boost but hurdles lack. Battle of abortion pill heads to Supreme Court. And why is America still flying the A-10 Warthog, a Cold War relic? And NFL's commanders near $6 billion US sale. So that is what we have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The Washington Post, guard member arrested in breach and reckless person seemingly at odds with a patriotic family. The Russia's commando unit gutted by war in Ukraine, and Snyder reaches a tentative deal to sell. Deaths from fentanyl spur an echo of war on drugs. Okay. The New York Post, geeky leaks. Soldier busted for worst security breach in 10 years. 21-year-old spilled war secrets to gamer buddies. I was just watching that story here a while ago. That has a lot of potential for diplomatic fallout there, but I'll leave that there for right now, and I'll just get into the other news across Africa in details, and then we shall have a bit of a conversation after that. We start from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The M23 rebel group in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have said they will not disarm or demobilize as long as there is no direct political dialogue with the government in Kinshasa. A rebel spokesperson, Lawrence Kanyuka, issued the statement on Twitter after the Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi said there would be no political negotiations with the rebels. Mr. Tshisekedi said that under an agreement negotiated by regional states, the M23 rebels are expected to demobilize before returning to civilian life. Under the brokered peace deal, the group has been withdrawing from areas it has captured. Over the last 18 months, about 750,000 people have been displaced by the fighting. And still staying with the DRC, the President of Democratic Republic of Congo has ruled out political negotiations with the M23 rebel group. As part of an internationally brokered peace deal, the group has been withdrawing from areas it has captured. President Felix Tshisekedi said according to an agreement, the M23 rebels are to demobilize before returning to civilian life. And so the group, which is widely reported to be backed by Rwanda, had previously said it was expecting negotiations with the Kinshasa government. And correspondents say, with the president ruling that out, the peace process could stumble. This peace process has been stumbling. I don't know what this new stumble will look like, but I guess it will just worsen things out. We'll come back to that story. Let's head over to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's main opposition party says it is expecting Nelson Chamisa to stand for a second time against Emerson Mnangagwa in presidential elections. The Citizens Coalition for Change said Mr. Chamisa, who's a lawyer and a Christian minister, was the only nominee who would be vetted before being formally announced as a candidate. The party has accused the governing ZANU-PF party of carrying out a crackdown on its political opponents ahead of the election, which is due in August. Some opposition campaign rallies have been banned by the police. Last week, Mr. Chamisa accused the government of weaponizing the law and unjustly incarcerating a CCC lawmaker, Job Sikala, who has been in prison since June after being accused of publishing falsehoods. We head over to Ethiopia, and state-linked rights watchdog has called for investigations into the killing of civilians and humanitarian workers during a recent protest in Amhara region. The killings were reportedly carried out by security forces and other unknown people. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said that the worsening insecurity could lead to abuse of rights and urged security forces against using excessive forces. Protests in Amhara region began last week in opposition to moves by federal authorities to resolve a regional paramilitary unit. The government says the unit will be integrated with the army or police to create a unified force, but opponents argue its dissolution could leave the region vulnerable to attacks by neighbors. Many of the major cities in the region appear to have returned to normalcy on Wednesday afternoon after days of protest, with businesses and offices reopening. A resident in the regional capital, Bahirda, has told the BBC that the reduced protest could be linked to the upcoming Ethiopian Easter to be celebrated this Sunday. And in Tanzania, the Vice President, Philip Mpango, has ordered police to close roads for only a few minutes and not for hours when clearing VIPs to pass. It came after police closed roads for 4 hours as Mr. Mpango toured the northern Mwanza region on Wednesday. He said He said this happened despite him warning the Inspector General of Police against long closure of roads. He apologized to Mwanza residents over the traffic congestion that he had caused. And then we go to Egypt, the latest spat between the country and Ethiopia. And Egypt's Deputy Foreign Minister on African Affairs has accused Ethiopia of buying time through negotiations while continuing to fill its disputed Nile Dam without an agreement. In a statement on Wednesday, the minister condemned statements by Ethiopia that had accused Cairo of politicizing the Nile Dam dispute. The fresh row received mixed reactions in Egyptian's local media. Prominent pro-state host Ahmed Musa said Addis Ababa intentionally built the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam to harm Egypt and Sudan. Opposition TV host Mohamed Nasser blamed the Egyptian government and media for not taking a strong stance against the issue. Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt have been embroiled in a years-long dispute over the dam, which Sudan and Egypt fear would reduce the shares of water from River Nile. And the latest from Sudan. Military warned on Thursday of potential clashes with the country's powerful paramilitary force, which it said had deployed troops in the capital Khartoum and other areas without the army's consent. Tensions between the military and the paramilitary, known as the Rapid Support Forces or RSF, have escalated in recent months, forcing a delay in the signing of an internationally backed deal with political parties to revive the country's democratic transition. In a statement, the military said the build-up of the RSF in Khartoum and elsewhere in the country was done without the approval or of the coordination with the armed forces leadership and presents a clear violation of the law. The paramilitary recently deployed troops near the northern Sudanese town of Merowe. Also, videos circulating on social media on Thursday show what appears to be RSF armed vehicles being transported into Khartoum further to the south. The latest tensions between the army and the paramilitary stem from a disagreement over how the RSF should be integrated into the military and what authority should oversee the process. The merger is a key condition of Sudan's unsigned transitional agreement. The army's RSF rivalry dates back to the rule of autocratic President Omar al-Bashir, who was ousted in 2019. Under al-Bashir, the paramilitary force led by the powerful General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo grew out of former militias known as Janjaweed that carried out a brutal crackdown in Sudan's Darfur region during the decades of conflict there. Although the army and the RSF together carried out a coup in October 2021 that appended Sudan's transition to democracy, friction between them became increasingly visible in recent months with conflicting public statements, heavy military presence in Khartoum, and parallel foreign trips by military and RSF leaders. The RSF said Wednesday that its presence in northern Sudan and elsewhere is aimed at achieving security and stability and fighting human trafficking and illegal migration. The wealthy paramilitary force is estimated to have tens of thousands of fighters. According to Koulad K, founder and director of Confluence Advisory, a think tank in Khartoum, he said tensions between the army and RSF are at an all-time high, and Thursday's military statement just fell short of accusing the RSF of committing the act of rebellion. The escalation has raised concern of new infighting in the country known for internal armed conflicts. Okay, and I think that is where we no, we still have another news item here that I'd like for us to look at. From Mali, yes. And militants affiliated to Islamic State group have taken Tindamane in Mali, further isolating the regional capital Minaka in a region that has fallen almost entirely under the control of officials and witnesses told the AFP on Wednesday. Tindamane's fall follows months of fighting by Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, or ISGS, to seize the northeastern village of a few thousand inhabitants, about 75 kilometers north of Mineka. All the region's main administrative subdivisions are now under the group's control. The village was captured Monday night. Another elected official told the AFP that the militants had instructed the village's residents to continue with businesses as usual, but to be prepared to begin paying zakat, an Islamic tax. A major ISGS offensive has been underway since early 2022 in the region of Menaka and that of Gao farther west. The regions have seen intense battles between ISGS fighters and the Al-Qaeda linked to support Islam and Muslims JNIM, as well as with former Tuareg independence fighters who signed a peace deal in 2015 and loyalists who were once fought for the independence fighters. The militants have stepped into a vacuum left when French forces departed last year. Experts now say hundreds of civilians have been killed in the violence and communities have been displaced in masses. Some have fled across the border to Tunisia. The UN and human rights organizations say militants have carried out punitive attacks against communities they accuse of helping the state or refusing to join their ranks. And back on the DRC still, and United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region, Mr. Huang Ji, on Thursday met with the facilitator of the East African Community on the conflict in the Eastern DRC, former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, for talks ahead of a session at the UN Security Council next week. Mr. Kenyatta leads the Nairobi peace process, which seeks to bring together the government of the DRC, armed groups fighting over various grievances in the eastern parts of the country. A dispatch from Kenyatta's office said the UN envoy noted that though significant progress has been registered in eastern DRC, there is need to work on long-term peace for the region, which the UN will support. The East African Community has been playing two tracks, dialogue and military means, to convince parties to negotiate. It deployed the East African Community Regional Force early this month to boost security in eastern DRC. It also plans more rounds of dialogue led by Mr. Kenyatta in eastern DRC in the coming weeks. Mr. Kenyatta said parties need to work on trust deficits, citing this as one of the reasons some armed groups are reluctant to lay down their arms. Mr. Kenyatta said the Nairobi process that is set to kick off in a few weeks will focus on the plight of the refugees, the internally displaced persons, and building the trust lost between the various parties. On Wednesday, the East African Community Regional Force, EACRF, troops thwarted a planned attack by gang members of a local armed group in Kibumba area, where Kenya Defense Forces and South Sudan People's Defense Forces troops are deployed. The gang is reported to have fired several rounds in the area, prompting a quick reaction force to respond, successfully repulsing them and containing the situation. And then we end our news from South Africa. And South Africa on Wednesday said an international arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin over Ukraine war was a spanner in the works ahead of the August BRICS summit in the country. Pretoria, which has close ties to Moscow, has been faced with a diplomatic dilemma since the International Criminal Court ICC issued an arrest warrant against Putin in March. Putin is due to attend a summit of the BRICS, a bloc which groups together Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in August. But the host nation, who is a member of the ICC, is expected to make the arrest if Putin steps foot in the country. The ICC warrant against Putin stems from accusations that Russia unlawfully deported Ukrainian children. Continental powerhouse South Africa refused to condemn the invasion of Ukraine, which has largely isolated Moscow on the international stage, saying it wants to stay neutral and prefers dialogue to end the war. It held a controversial joint military exercise earlier this year with Russia and China, which critics cite as evidence of a tilt towards the Kremlin. South Africa's ties with Russia dates back decades when the Kremlin backed the country's ruling African National Congress in its fight against apartheid. The ICC warrant has been the cause of political tumult in the country. South Africa's leading opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, has called for the Putin to be arrested and for the ICC to pressure the country's government. But leftist parties, including South Africa's Communist Party, which is close ally of the ruling African National Congress, have urged the government to welcome the Russian leader and pull out of the ICC instead. I guess that kind of a solution will do it, you know, just South Africa to pull out of ICC, and that would free South Africa from any kind of responsibility. So you are now up to date. Those are the top stories in the continent this morning. So the issue of South Africa and whether South Africa will be willing to hand over Putin to the ICC should he visit that country during the BRICS meeting. I think it appears, I thought this was something quite simple, and in my first opinion, I think when this matter came up, I'd assumed that Putin might actually want to visit South Africa, and South Africa would not feel obligated to arrest Putin. But from the kind of moves that has been made and the concerns and how South Africa is handling this, it appears this is a weighty matter and indeed a weighty decision that South Africa seems to be grappling with, and it is taking this ICC warrant of arrest very, very seriously. It did send some members, top-ranking members of the ANC party to Russia about 2 weeks ago, to try and talk out this matter. So that tells you this is something that bothers the leadership of South Africa, and I think it is quite torn as to whether to allow Russia, which it does have a good relationship with, and the president to come to South Africa in August during this summit, or just to have maybe Russia send somebody else instead to represent the Russian government in South Africa. Alternatively, I had earlier argued that Putin might just decide to show up in South Africa just for, to thumb the nose and show the world that Putin can be whatever he wants to be, and there's nothing you can do about it, I think. But it appears that I might have spoken too soon, as I didn't think that South Africa was really taking this warrant of arrest very seriously, based on the comments and how they were handling this matter before that. But I could have been wrong, or maybe they were wrong initially, so they went to and they thought about it, and they said as much as the relationship with Russia is really important and paramount and means a lot and dates way back to before even South Africa got its independence. And so as much as that is important, but also the brand and where South Africa is in the international community and what it is known for in the international community, also that does not need to suffer. So I think it's really quite a diplomatic quagmire there for South Africa. Is Putin going to come to South Africa or not? I think this is something that now South Africa has to grapple with, and I think at the end of the day, like I've said here time and time again, South Africa will only make a decision that after weighing all these options and what it stands to gain or lose, that will fit its own interest. So if the relationship with Russia outweighs the benefits it gets from the rest of the members in the international system, then it will go ahead and have Putin come and attend this summit, and they will not arrest him, and then he will go back. In fact, they will even have dancers dancing for him, receiving him. The welcome committee like we normally have here in the continent at the airport there. But that is, if at all Putin now will come, it's hard to tell, but you can tell this is something that is really very difficult, and South African government is really, really finding a hard time in deciding whether Putin should visit or not. And I can probably assume, and this is just an assumption I'm making, there's no truth to it, that perhaps Putin is like, come on, you're friends, I have to attend this summit, because this will be a great chance also for him to flex his muscles and perhaps to just show how he can do whatever, and perhaps just show how his relationship with South Africa is strong, and maybe test South Africa's loyalty even to Russia. It's a lot when it comes to these diplomatic relations that we see out there. But South Africa is a member has ratified this ICC, and so it has a responsibility and an obligation to respect these rules that have been set apart, the international laws, and it will be difficult for it to escape unless it just decides that is what it wants to do. And since South Africa is an independent country, there's nothing you're going to do about it. I mean, we do have this rationale. It's a permanent member of the United Nations, and look at what it's doing right now, and there's nothing the United Nations can do about it. So at the end of the day, these international laws, ICC does not have a policing body that can go arrest Putin. They've issued a warrant of arrest. If that was, say, something that was issued by a court here in Kenya, and that person was in Kenya, then Kenya has the jurisdiction and has the system, the judicial system, to arrest. Will be arrested because we do have the police, and the person will be arraigned in court, and we will follow the due process. But in the international system, we don't have that. They can't arrest. They can only issue this warrant of arrest, and then the implementation of such decisions are usually based on the goodwill of the member states. So now the goodwill of South Africa is being tested. So we're waiting to see if at all South Africa, you are a respecter of international law, or you have mastered the idea of the international system being anarchic, and so a state has to always fight for its own interest and secure its own interest. So as this is another diplomatic story just unfolding, and I'm curious to see what kind of position South Africa will take, and if at all President Putin of Russia will indeed visit South Africa during the BRICS summit in August. Okay, all right. So now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay, we've not talked about the DRC for a moment now. So let's just go back and see what is really happening, and then we can go back to Sudan and also find out what's going on there in Sudan. But I guess you already know what's going on there in Sudan. Everything that we have been prophesying on this platform seems to be upholding. But the problem with that is that now it keeps placing Sudan in a position that is very, very precarious. But we'll get into that in a short bit. Let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the latest from there, as I have read there before. President of the DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, has ruled out any political negotiations with the M23 rebel group. And the M23 rebel group has also insisted that the only way they're going to disarm and to demobilize is after they've had direct political dialogue with the government of Kinshasa. Now that is the stalemate. And I don't know how we move on from here. And even as we think about how we move on from here, the facilitator of this one side of this peace negotiations. Remember, in diplomacy, there are two tracks. There's track 1 and there's track 2, and track 2 is divided into many other sub-tracks there. But track 1, this is normally between sort of governments. It's just the government, the official diplomatic channels, and track 2 is now where you have these other non-state actors. You have civil service, civil society, you have religious leaders, you have these other groups that also are involved in trying to find to resolve a conflict in conflict resolution or in conflict management. There are two tracks of diplomatic engagements. And so a lot of times, especially in a situation like the Democratic Republic of Congo, obviously track 1, which is the official negotiations or diplomatic approach, is really not working. Usually it's formal and it's government and all that. So it has not been working. That's why we now have all these other actors being brought to on board, and to just complement the efforts of the track 1. And the efforts of track 1, in this case, and really do not work in harmony with what the rest of the tracks of diplomacy are looking to do. Because when you look at how President Felix Tshisekedi and his approach and how he wants this conflict management to take place and how he wants some of these things to be implemented, quite differs with these other players and how they see as the best approach, and perhaps a way that will give us a quick solution to this conflict. By that I mean, for instance, this East African regional force, its approach is, if we are going to fight the M23, then we must fight even the FDLR and other rebel forces that are causing this instability in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But President Tshisekedi and his government, those in the track one diplomatic approach, he's saying that no, the only person I want you to be fighting is M23. That should be your target. That should be your target. And the East African regional forces are feeling like this is a setup. This is a setup based on the information that is going on, based on the allegations that are being made. You're setting us up, and this has the potential to set this region, the East African Community region, in another further diplomatic problems. And we might see an escalation of even diplomatic spats between the East African community countries. And that's why I think this position by the East African community regional force is very important and paramount. And they're saying, we do understand M23 is your biggest problem, but because of the dynamics of the East African community, and we know also, as much as M23 is a problem, but there are others that also are known to be a problem in this, a factor in this conflict. So this approach that you're insisting we should take it across board. There should be one rule book. If you're fighting all rebels, then we're fighting all rebels. End of story. So that, and I think that is really fundamental. So you can see there's a difference of opinion, there's a difference of approach, there's a difference of perspective, and there's a difference of strategy. So for track 2 approach to really be successful, track 1 and track 2 must be, because track 2 is supposed to complement what is already being done in track 1. But if track 1 is having a different ideas compared to this other track, then that is what we have now, a stalemate. That is what we have, a stalemate. And yesterday, the United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region, Mr. Huan Xie, on Thursday, met with the facilitator of the East African community of the conflict for the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. That is our former president here in Kenya, former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And President Kenyatta said that the East African Community Regional Force must continue to enjoy the confidence of all parties if it is to be successful in its mandate. President Kenyatta, I like that you're a very optimistic person. I think that is one thing that we noted here with President Kenyatta, even how he was leading this country. I think he's very optimistic, and he's always looking for the best outcome. But we have to be realistic with what we are dealing with in this ground. As much as you want to, your wish is for the East African Community Regional Force to continue enjoying the confidence of all parties. If it has to be successful, the East African Regional Force must first be working in tandem with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, if the mandate there seems to be differing, because the East African Community Regional Force has a specific mandate, but the president of the DRC does not agree with that mandate. So what do you do then? What happens there, President Kenyatta? How can this build confidence if a very important party to this mediation is reading from a different script? That has to be addressed. That, I think, is very, very important. And on Wednesday, the EACRF troops thwarted a planned attack. I've said that was meant to target the Kenyan forces Now why? And the South Sudanese forces are where they were. And so the troops have since enhanced patrols within the areas to deter any further threats, especially to the local population, who have since been sensitized to continue with their normal activities, says a statement from the East African Community Regional Force. This is a tall order, and I can imagine the kind of work and the back and forth that President Kenyatta has to deal with in regards to this conflict because of the complexity of the issues around this conflict. I don't know if there's anything much. The East African Community Force, they're supposed to have their mandate renewed, I think, which lapses at the end of this month, I believe. But that has to be renewed by the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Felix Tshisekedi has to renew that mandate. But now that they are not in agreement, the mandate, they're not in agreement. I don't know if, but I'm sure, he will. I think he will review. He will renew this mandate. I believe he will. I don't think there's a reason for him not to, but it is important, even as President Kenyatta says, that the East African Community Regional Force must continue to enjoy the confidence of all parties. It also must enjoy the confidence of the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is very, very key, and that is very, very important. And President Felix Tshisekedi, what is it with your insistence of not wanting to talk with the M23 rebels? What is it? What is it that is so big, that is so big, that you can't calm down and meet with these rebel groups, just hear them out? I'm not saying agreeing with any of whatever it is that they want, but sit down and hear them out, and then, see how you move from there. What is the big deal? Can you not copy the example of what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and what he did? He had proscribed TPLF as a terrorist group, but he realized these hard stances only go to hurt the people, only goes to hurt the country. So he swallowed his pride, and it was very difficult for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. It took him years, 2 years, almost 2 years since the war began. And remember, because Olusegun Obasanjo had been trying to facilitate those talks from 2021 when African Union appointed him to do that. But he was never successful until Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta came into the scene, and he was able to help in brokering this mediation and this stalemate, and to even convince Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He was not interested in coming to the table. He was taking the same hard stance that you were taking, and that was detrimental to the country. So could you just listen to what these people are saying? I know some of the issues they have been complaining about, and perhaps you're aware about, but just meet up with them and hear what you have nothing to lose. You don't have to agree with their demands, but you have nothing to lose. So if they're saying you're the only person they want to talk to, they want a direct political dialogue with the government in Kinshasa, and the government in Kinshasa, aka President Felix Tshisekedi, is ruling out any political talks. So now, where does this leave the rest of the actors in this conflict? Where does this leave the facilitators? Where does this leave every other person that has made contribution in trying to mediate this process? You are holding everybody at ransom. I think you should just go for the sake of the country. Sometimes you have to put your pride down. And even members of parliament from the eastern part of the DRC urged their president to go meet with the M23. They did that a few months ago. I was telling you about that at the beginning of the year. They were encouraging President Tshisekedi, because enough is enough. Until when are we going to keep having these problems, and yet these hard stands are not bringing any kind of a solution? I think you should, for the sake of the country and for the sake of the people who are suffering, President Felix Tshisekedi, if you really, really do care about your people, I think you should swallow your pride and you should meet up with this group and see if that will make a difference. I'm not saying you agree with some of these demands that they are making, but I think for the good of your country, sometimes you make decisions that you might not want because it's not about you. This looks very personal. Whatever it is that is going on between you and President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, this seems to be very, very personal now and has really nothing so much to do with the country. You have to put the country first and its people and do what's best for it. And I think right now dialogue is the best way. You've been trying to fight this rebel group for how long now? With all this help that the country is getting from these, the forces, the United Nations forces, the East African Community forces, and these other forces, how much have they been able to achieve as far as especially protecting the lives of the civilians, which I think these forces have really failed miserably? Not much, and the people there continue to suffer. Your people have been living in refugee camps for God knows how long. Your people have been up and down carrying their personal wares every day, moving from their homes because of the insecurity. At what point do you decide enough is enough? Let me put my pride aside and let me look at other options that could help in leading to a quick resolution. Because as long as this conflict continues being protracted and becomes perennial as it has been, you are not even benefiting as a country. It is other countries that are benefiting from the DRC, which have vast interest over your vast minerals that you have in your country. So if they're the ones who are asking you to continue taking these hardline positions, then you need to rethink. I think you need to put the interest of your country first and see how you can solve this problem. Otherwise, this what do you call it? What President Uhuru Kenyatta is saying, and this positivity seems to be exhibiting here, this might be thwarted. This might be thwarted. So I think the ball now is on the court of the DRC's government, and the kind of decision they will make that will help in finding a quick resolution to this problem, if at all they're really interested. Because it's difficult to tell now if at all they're even committed to finding a solution in the DRC. But I also do understand the position of the government. They're feeling, why have you invaded our country and then you have to come here and set rules and set out conditions for you to exit parts that you've illegally acquired in my country. So I can understand the position of the Democratic Republic of Government's position as far as the M23 is concerned, but still I think we need to engage more in dialogue, and we need to open up those channels of communication and so that we can get this going. It's tedious now. In fact, it's just yesterday we were having this conversation and Dr. Matanga was saying, no, who is even talking about the DRC conflict anymore? It's not in the headline as it were a few months ago or a few weeks ago, because at some point people suffer fatigue and we move on to the next conflict. Okay? Ethiopia treated us to a 2-year madness there of a conflict. We've moved on. Okay? So that's what happens. South Sudan, people tried and people are still trying to help, and other stakeholders, but they're insisting on not finding a solution. The leaders, people move on, because the world and how things are dynamic, sometimes people can only push you and help you to just a certain stage, but you must want that for yourself. Otherwise, people get fatigued and they check out and they move on to the next thing that they need to be putting their attention and sometimes even their resources to. Okay, let's leave that alone then. But we wish President Uhuru Kenyatta all the best with facilitation in that conflict, because he needs it. He needs a lot of prayers, because these actors involved, there's no goodwill there at all. Okay, another ticking time bomb, this time in Sudan, where now Sudan's military, the official military, warned of a potential clashes with country's powerful paramilitary force, which it said had deployed troops in the capital of Khartoum and other areas without army's consent. How powerful is this paramilitary force? How powerful is this Janjaweed? I know it was very active, and they had a relationship, the army and this RSF. They had a relationship, although the rivalry dates back to the rule of former President Omar al-Bashir, was ousted in 2019 under al-Bashir. The paramilitary force led by powerful General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who's still the head of it, by the way, the second in command in the Sudan's army, grew out of former militias known as the Janjaweed that carried out a brutal crackdown. Okay, now, let me just put a pin there and highlight a point I've been trying to make when it comes to even the fight against Al-Shabaab in Somalia and those militia groups in South Sudan that the government is using to help it fight, or rather address the issue of security. Now, Somalia, let me just go back to Somalia. Somalia has been, under the new leadership, has been making a good progress as far as its fight against Al-Shabaab is concerned. And much of this progress is credited to the local militias from the villages who were formed, and they are coming in and they're assisting the government against the government forces against the fight against Al-Shabaab. And as much as this has been wonderful, but I think the problem I've been having with this kind of arrangement is that, fine, they will help fight this Al-Shabaab, and if this continued partnership goes on, then for sure Al-Shabaab might become a thing of the past. But after this is done, so what do you plan to do with this militia? How do you plan to integrate them? What role will they play? Are you using them to solve a security problem now without you knowing that you could be forming or fomenting another security crisis later on in the years to come? And that has always been my point of argument in how these militias are being integrated into the, not really integrated, but they're working together with the government forces to fight the Al-Shabaab. And by the time they're being integrated, that means they're able to access some level of intelligence for them to be told, okay, this is what is happening, so this is the information we have, so this is how we should plan our attacks and things like that. They must have a bit of access to intelligence reports and all that, so that they're able to organize themselves properly and fight, because Al-Shabaab is not just people you walk around and they don't have a face. They don't have a face, so it requires high-level intelligence and all that to gather information and to organize for how to fight them. So they have access to this. These are militia groups. So this is the same thing that is now haunting Sudan. This is a militia that was crafted, that was fighting in Darfur, the Janjaweed, and they have become mercenaries for hire. They're being used and they're being exported in other countries. So their mandate is very opaque as far as security of a country is concerned. And I think the military could be having this concern, but now their head, who is Hamdan Dagalo, the second in command in the military, is insisting on an integration process under an agreement that was signed, but this was not even part of that agreement. This is not officially captured in that transitional agreement, but it's saying this group has to be integrated in the national army, and the army is saying no. So this has become a point of contention in Sudan that is now perhaps creating a very healthy ground for Sudan to go south. You know, if this is not solved, if this is not addressed, then there's no telling what's the worst that can happen here right now. I think Sudan is at tentacles as it is. So the current report is that General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo and his group, they have been doing a lot of recruitment, and they have been deploying these groups, the RSF, across the country. Like, is this a whole military outfit? What is really going on? How many points of power do we have there? Which one is the official military? How do they employ their troops across Khartoum and other areas? And they're doing this without the consent of the army. This is dangerous for the country. This is dangerous for the country, and we should all worry about these new developments in Sudan. Now, many took to social media to express their concerns. These are Sudanese, and Sudan's National Umma Party, one of the country's largest political groups, called for restraint and urged all political forces against escalating the situation. This is not a political thing anymore. This is a military thing, and that is the worry. It is bigger than politics. It is bigger than politics. When you have people who are armed, disagreeing, and who are in the top leadership of a country, and who have the security apparatus in their hands, then it's more than politics. This is a security problem, and should be treated with the same urgency. And I don't know why IGAD is not saying anything anymore at all, or they're waiting for an armed struggle now, pitting the military against itself there in Sudan for them to come out and say something. And the party also called for an emergency meeting Thursday morning with military and RSF representatives and senior political figures. No details immediately emerged following the meeting. A joint statement Thursday by envoys to Sudan from France, Germany, Norway, Britain, and United States and the European Union said they were deeply concerned about the recent escalation. It called on the military and the RSF to resolve the outstanding issues on security and establish a unified professional military accountable to a civilian government. This unified is where the problem falls. And then this RSF seems to be. Now I understand why they will put up such a statement, because this RSF seems to be siding with the civilian side and is urging the military to hasten the process of transition so that Sudan can go back to a civilian rule. And the military is not in a hurry to do that, you see. Now, in response to the escalation, the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum advised American citizens on Thursday against traveling to northern Sudan. Also, U.S. government staff have been prohibited from venturing beyond the capital's metropolitan area until next Thursday. It said the 2021 coup removed Western-backed power-sharing administration and dashed Sudanese aspirations for democratic rule after 3 decades of the leadership of former President Omar al-Bashir. So, a conflict is really brewing in Sudan. Yes, it is. And if it's not really brought under control, we are looking at very difficult times in this region, and this could be another point of instability in the greater Horn of Africa. So I'm just hoping that the regional bodies will perhaps seek to intervene before things get out of hand. I want to thank you so much for your time. It's about 8 minutes past 12 here in Nairobi. This is Friday, the 14th of April, and those were the top stories across Africa today. I wish you a wonderful weekend, and we will see you here on Sunday for more news and more conversations about Africa at 2 p.m. East African time. Until then, bye-bye, and have yourselves a great week.